November 26, 1922. Howard Carter pressed his eye to a small hole in a stone wall. 3,000 years of darkness stared back at him. He held his candle to the opening. His hand was shaking. Gold glittered back from the darkness. His financier, Lord Carnarvon, stood behind him, barely breathing, and asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter couldn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "Yes, wonderful things." What followed that sentence is one of the most documented and most deliberately distorted stories in the history of archaeology. People died, strangely, repeatedly, and the world decided it knew exactly why. They were wrong, but the truth is stranger than the legend, and considerably more embarrassing for the curse. But before the curse, you need to know who was inside that tomb, because the story of the boy king is stranger than anything that came after him. Tutankhamun became pharaoh at 9 years old. 9. He commanded armies, oversaw temples, and was worshipped as a living god, all before he was old enough to shave. He ruled for 10 years and died in 1323 BC, aged 18 or 19. Nobody is entirely sure how. A chariot injury, a bone disease, a mosquito-borne illness, possibly a combination of all three. He left no children. His name was deliberately erased from official records by the rulers who followed him. For 3,000 years, he was essentially forgotten, buried under 150,000 tons of rock in the Valley of the Kings, waiting. Carter had been searching for years. By 1922, Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy English aristocrat funding everything, had run completely out of patience. In June 1922, he summoned Carter to his castle in England and told him plainly, he was done. No more money. Carter pleaded for one final season. He even offered to pay for it himself. Carnarvon reluctantly agreed. On November 1st, 1922, Carter returned to the Valley of the Kings, knowing this was almost certainly his last chance. 3 days later, not Carter, but a young water boy named Hussein Abdel Rasoul stumbled on a carved stone in the sand. It was the top of a buried stairway. Carter immediately had the site covered back up and sent a telegram to Carnarvon in England. Wonderful discovery in valley. Magnificent tomb with seals intact. Come at once. On November 26th, Carter made that small hole in the wall and saw what no human had seen in over 3,000 years. Inside, almost entirely intact despite 2 robbery attempts in antiquity. Over 5,000 items. Solid gold funeral shoes, statues, games, a golden funerary mask, 3 nested coffins, the innermost made of solid gold. The forgotten boy king, found by a water boy whose name barely made it into the history books. And within months, the man who funded it all would be dead. Lord Carnarvon was the man who almost gave up, who nearly walked away 3 days before the greatest archaeological find of the 20th century. On April 5, 1923, 4 months and 7 days after standing in that tomb, he was dead. A mosquito bite on his cheek had become infected. He died of blood poisoning and pneumonia. It was an ordinary death for the era. Antibiotics did not yet exist, and Carnarvon had been in fragile health for years following a serious car accident in 1901, making him more vulnerable than most. But his son later claimed that at the exact moment of his father's death, all the lights in Cairo went out, and back in England, his father's dog let out a howl and died. Whether those details are true or embellished by a grieving son hardly mattered. The press had their story, and once the press has a story about a 3,000-year-old Egyptian curse, reason takes the next boat home. But the curse story didn't start with Carnarvon's death. It started before it, weeks before, when a novelist named Marie Corelli wrote something that the press would never forget. Her piece circulated in New York's New World magazine, asserting that dire punishment would find those who opened the pharaoh's tomb. When Carnarvon died, her prediction seemed confirmed. Newspapers ran with it globally. Howard Carter, the man who actually discovered and opened the tomb, consistently dismissed the curse as complete nonsense. He called it Tommy rot. He said the sentiment of the Egyptologist was one of respect and awe, entirely opposed to foolish superstitions. Nobody wanted to hear that. The curse sold papers. The truth didn't. And the press kept finding new material because the deaths kept coming. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, who x-rayed the mummy, died in 1924. Arthur Mace of Carter's excavation team died in 1928 of deteriorating health. Carter's secretary, Richard Bethel, was found dead in his bed in 1929 under circumstances never fully explained. Bethel's own father committed suicide in 1930. Each death added a name to the list. Each name added weight to the legend. Then there was the paperwork. paperweight. Carter had given his friend Sir Bruce Ingham a mummified hand wearing a scarab bracelet inscribed, "Cursed be he who moves my body. To him shall come fire, water, and pestilence." Shortly after receiving it, Ingham's house burned to the ground. When he rebuilt, it flooded. Ingham himself didn't die. The curse apparently decided 2 out of 3 was sufficient and moved on. Here is what the newspapers never printed. Of the 58 people present when the tomb was opened, only 8 died within a dozen years. The rest were all still alive. A 2002 analysis by Professor Mark Nelson of Monash University found that people who entered the tomb during its initial opening did not live significantly shorter lives than those in Egypt who never entered. Lady Evelyn Herbert, Carnarvon's own daughter, and among the first inside, lived another 57 years and died in 1980. Howard Carter, the man who first broke the seal and spent 10 years inside removing every single item, died 17 years later of natural causes at 64. For a 3,000-year-old supernatural death sentence, it was remarkably bad at its job. If this was a curse, it had the aim of someone throwing darts in the dark, blindfolded, facing the wrong direction. So if the curse wasn't real, what actually killed them? Scientists decided to find out. Studies revealed that some ancient mummies carried dangerous mold, including Aspergillus niger and Aspergillus flavus, species that can cause serious respiratory damage and are particularly lethal for people with already weakened immune systems. Lord Carnarvon, weakened by years of respiratory problems following his 1901 car accident, would have been especially vulnerable. Researchers writing in The Lancet noted that spores of Aspergillus can remain dormant before being suddenly activated, fitting precisely with the pattern of deaths following the opening. The tomb also contained abundant grain offerings sealed inside for 3,000 years, exactly the environment where this mold thrives undisturbed. So the theory has quietly shifted from supernatural ancient curse to an ancient biological hazard zone that sat sealed and waiting for 3 millennia, which is both less mystical and significantly more alarming. But one detail no mold study has ever touched. One detail sitting in Carter's personal notes for decades. The detail he felt needed recording and never explained. On the day the tomb opened, a messenger was sent to Carter's house. As he approached, he heard a faint, almost human cry. He found a cobra in Carter's birdcage. Carter's canary was dead in its mouth. The Egyptologist James Henry Breasted recorded this in writing. The cobra is the royal symbol of the Egyptian pharaoh, worn on the crown to strike down the king's enemies. Cobras getting into bird cages happens. Birds attract snakes. But the timing, the symbolism, that specific day. Carter wrote it in his notes, a practical man who spent years dismissing curse stories. But he wrote it down, and I find that the fact that even the most skeptical man in that valley felt something needed documenting, more unsettling than any headline ever written about a curse. The tomb is still there. The artifacts are in Cairo. The curse, officially, never existed. No inscription, no warning. Just a 9-year-old boy who became a god king, ruled for 10 years, died before he was 20, and was forgotten for 3 millennia. Found not by the archaeologist who spent his life searching, but by a water boy named Hussein Abdel Rasoul, who kicked a stone in the sand on a November morning in 1922 and accidentally changed history. The cobra was real, the mold was real, the deaths were real. What sat sealed in those walls for 3,000 years, and what it did to those who opened them, is still not answered. I don't know where it ends, neither does anyone else.